And what's going on, Trojans fans, LA football fans? This is the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network, coming at you live after a brutal Cotton Bowl loss for our Trojans, 46-45. The final, a lot to get into, a lot to unpack, a lot of emotions, a lot of changing emotions just in the last 5 minutes of this game. A lot of disappointment. Obviously, there's positives from this season, but there's hard to find a lot of those at this moment in time, but we'll try our best to talk at least some of those looking to the future. Joining me, as always, my better half, the madman, Jamal. How you doing? Happy New Year officially, January 2nd, observing New Year's Day. We got to see some of the Rose Parade here in Pasadena earlier, go right into this game, and now we're sitting here, obviously, with a lot of disappointment, but how are you doing and how are you feeling after this tough loss?
Well, I was doing well this morning, Ryan, and I was doing pretty well until about 1:30 this afternoon. And then the last 25 minutes, all hell has broken loose here. Just unfathomable. I can't even talk right now. Unfathomable, unconscionable collapse. Just a total collapse by the Trojans. Just without words right now. It was a game that looked firmly in hand. I think the narrative was going to be Caleb was special, overcame this defense. This defense was this defense, but that last 3.5 minutes of this game in terms of Tulane being able to score so easily after 45-30 in two plays, essentially. And then Mario Williams with the inexplicable judgment of trying to catch that kickoff that was certainly going to go out of bounds. And SC gets the ball at the 1 yard line. And then the safety, which was sort of emblematic of the whole game for SC in terms of their real inability to run the football. Outside of that one Raleek Brown 39-yard touchdown run at the end of the first half, Austin Jones really couldn't get anything going. And I was about to message you, Ryan, and I was like, the only way SC loses this game is if it's a safety. Just make sure it's not a safety. And lo and behold, the first down play got close, and then the second play got blown up 2 yards into the end zone. And then I think every USC fan, every LA football fan knew when Tulane got that ball back, they were going to score a touchdown. This defense has been just such a joke the whole year. And if this doesn't ultimately force Lincoln Riley to really consider Alex Grinch and his role on this team next year, I'm not sure what will. But it's glaring, and I think symbolically, and Ryan, I'll hand it over to you. They kept just showing Caleb, on the bench, and just that look of despair. He knew, he was almost praying, that last 2 minutes that God, just give me a miracle here, because this defense is obviously going to blow it. They've done it all year, and they've just gotten lucky, frankly. I mean, 3 losses probably would have been 5 if the likes of a DTR and the likes of a Chance Nolan don't throw interceptions. That you can only get lucky with these gifts. I told you earlier in the day, Ryan, the defense has been relying all year on these gifts from God. I mean, even gifts from God run out. Look, Christmas is over. The holiday season is over. The gifts from God run out at some point, and they certainly ran out today. And inexplicable loss here. I'm stunned.
Yeah. Tony, thanks for tuning in. I don't think we're at this point. Riley got to go. I think it's definitely on Riley to make some decisions about the defense, because he is the overall head coach. But let's not forget, this was a 4-8 team last year with zero culture. And, this team still finishes 11-3. And once we can get this taste out of our mouth, we can look back at some of that. But I mean, we definitely haven't been defenders of Grinch by any means. We haven't been fire him every week like everyone else, but this defense has obviously been the Achilles heel of the team since the spring game. And there's been questions around this defense. Part of it, I think, is just wrong players in this system, which that's probably the biggest issue. But you have a whole month off to prepare for one team. You should be able to get more than 3 stops. We've said all year long, Jamal, that 4 stops gets you wins with this offense. All you need is 4 stops. All they could get was 3. They could only get 3 stops in this game, and that's what it came down to. And so if you're Lincoln Riley now, you know what you have. You know what this team can become. You know what you have on offense. But in order to get to that point, and I'll be honest, I think defense is overrated in college. We saw in the college football playoff, all those games were 40-plus points. Even Georgia with an all-star cast and Kirby Smart, their coach, gave up 40-plus points. However, you have to have sound tackling. You have to be more stout in certain run defense situations. You have to be able to make plays when they matter. And like you said, not just get these gifts that keep you in these games. And this defense has not been that at all year long. So now it's going to be on Lincoln Riley to say, I know what we can be, but can we get there with this guy calling shots from defense? And I don't think anyone can say with any confidence that that's the case, even with some of these new transfers coming in, even with some different players they can put in the trenches, Jamal. I mean, I have no reason to believe this defense all of a sudden is going to be a top 10, top 15, top 90 unit next year from where they are right now. And that's the disappointing part.
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, there's three things I'm going to say here. And one is I agree with some of what you're saying. I disagree with some other things. One is I was really disappointed by this defensive performance, considering what Lincoln Riley said in the days leading up, that this team has taken this personally. There's a laser focus on the defensive side of the ball. We've been prepared. We're ready to play for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And it was the same story all over again in terms of the missed tackling. I mean, the tackling was atrocious in this game. Yep. Second, Ryan, Tulane won this game with 8 completions. The quarterback, Michael Pratt, had 8 completions in this game, and they were able to score 46 points and win the game. And C, unlike some of the games yesterday or the day before in the college football playoff, there was no fluke pick sixes here. There were no double reverses with the wide receiver. There were no flea flickers here. Tulane just lined up and ran the football, and Tyjae Spears went crazy. And there were just a couple of simple inside slant plays that went for huge chunks in this game. And Ryan, you say the 3 stops. I mean, one was completely unforced at the end of that first half. I mean, the Tulane guy just dropped it on that crosser. The defense had absolutely nothing to do with it. And then they got the gift again with Tyjae Spears on the fumble. So I agree with you that obviously where college football is headed, you have to be elite at the quarterback and at the vertical passing game level, but you still need to have some semblance of defense. You know, the TCUs, the Michigans, they gave up a lot of points in some fluky ways. I think Georgia gave up a lot of points because Marvin Harrison Jr. is an NFL star playing college football. And the moment he got out of the game, they couldn't score at all. And so it was really a testament to individual greatness. Here, this situation to me is completely different. This is ineptitude in terms of tackling and how you can give up 46 points to a guy that had 8 completions the whole game. It just shows that they just ran the football, they missed tackles, and were able to score. And Caleb is so special that he's able to overcome that and still play in these games where you expect to win. The margin for error for him is so small, and he's still able to sort of deliver. But now you go into an offseason where there's a clear divide here between offense and defense. And Caleb's body language at the end told me volumes, because ESPN was bragging about him the whole game, and rightfully so, absolutely rightfully so, in terms of his character, his intelligence, his pedigree, his parents, just him being born and bred for this moment. So 100% agree with everything. He is a superstar. But when you see your superstar there, it wasn't like he was standing up, pumping up his guys. He wasn't one of the towel guys there. He sat back and said, well, this is going to be my 3rd loss of the season because this defense can't stop anybody. And he was literally praying for 3 minutes. How do you overcome that culture now when that divide is so great? Lincoln Riley is one of the 5 best coaches in this sport. Lincoln Riley is one of the 3 best offensive minds in this sport. But Lincoln Riley and Chip Kelly are in 2 very similar boats here, where they have loyalties to defensive coordinators right now that are holding them back.
Yeah, it's actually insane how similar the UCLA and USC situations are. UCLA also loses to Pitt on a defensive collapse as well. And yeah, no, I agree with all that, Jamal. And I'm definitely, and I'm not even comparing this Cotton Bowl matchup with Tulane to a Georgia-Ohio State matchup by any means. Very, very different style of games. But, you know, also when you look at just on the other coin of it, you know, games come down to 2 things: which team makes more plays, which team makes less mistakes. And when you look at it, Tulane had essentially 2 mistakes: the drop pass in that first half drive and the fumble. And USC had 2 big mistakes: the out of bounds, or they essentially turned into 3 mistakes, but the Mario Williams dropped kick return, the Caleb Williams interception in the red zone, and then the safety given up. And so that one mistake, when it's that margin of error, and you cannot overcome that. That's where this team, that's why they lost, and that's why this team needs to make a big shift in culture and defensive change in order to get to that next point, to make that, next step, that next jump. And, there's a lot of times in games where fluky things happen and Cinderella stories. Talk about TCU being a Cinderella story. I mean, we look at that game where Michigan has a absolute touchdown catch that the refs call inexplicitly down at the 1, and they fumble on the next play, giving TCU the ball back. So these things happen. However, TCU still did enough also to overcome their own mistakes and win that football game, where USC just did not, in terms of the defense. And when you get that last stop, and I mean, what's even more frustrating that you alluded to, and we've talked about, but it's the tackling. Like, how can you be that egregious and that poor? It's actually like pretty impressive. You could be that bad at tackling at this stage, at this level of football. And take nothing away from Tulane, who obviously we said in the pre-show is a very good team, definitely can be matched up well in this game. Their running game is going to be hard to slow down, and they're coached by a great coach. But almost all of their big plays, outside of the one slant pattern that they got to bring it within one score, it was missed tackles and running between the tackles, where there was 2, 3, 4 guys that running backs just bouncing off of and extending those plays to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 40 yards. And you're never going to beat anyone if you can't tackle. And as bad as some of the defenses have looked in these bowl games, and these have been just offensive juggernauts. I mean, the Fiesta Bowl, the highest scoring Fiesta Bowl ever, or maybe it was the Sugar Bowl, the highest scoring Sugar Bowl ever. There was at least some sound tackling in those games. And that's where this is, I think, the most frustrating is it's just, that they're going to get, I mean, Tulane averaged 11 yards a clip, averaged 11 yards per play. And all that was done on the ground, running in the trenches. And so that is what they have to change. And I just don't think I don't know if it's fixable with this regime on the defensive side.
And Ryan, I think it's two things. Number one, 90% of it is tackling. And number two, everyone is realizing that you got to get your skill guys in the middle of the field against this linebacker zone. I mean, if you look at the two big plays, that big 87-yard pass play in the first half for Tulane, that was, Corey Foreman just got burned on, totally whiffed. But why is Corey Foreman having to deal with a shifty 5'10" wide receiver who's really, really fast at Tulane? It was a bad matchup. And then the inside slant, that was with looking like the corner needed some over the help top and just didn't get it, and then got burned again all the way to the 4-yard line when it was 45-30. And then everything else was just missed tackling, and they couldn't handle Tyjae Spears at all. I completely agree with you. And then when you sort of fast forward this, Ryan, most probably Tui Pelotu is declaring for the NFL draft. So as bad as this defense is, the best player on this defense is not going to be here next year. And the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year is most probably going to be moving on to the NFL. So this is a ground up job in terms of, this rebuild. And I think the other pieces of it is also going to be that USC is going to need to upgrade at the running back spot going into next year. Now losing Travis Dye, because they can't have this situation where they can't run the ball effectively and they have such a terrible defense. There's only so much you can put on Superman. I mean, my goodness, they're just putting so much on Caleb Williams right now that it's absolutely remarkable. And he's delivering. I mean, at the end of the day, USC punted once in this game, Ryan, and it was at the very end with the safety. I mean, how do you lose a game where you don't punt for the first 58 minutes of the game? I mean, the amount of strain and pressure that you're putting on this one guy is absolutely incredible. And there just has to be a wholesale job here moving forward. I'm a little concerned about this SC team going forward in the next year because they need to upgrade at running back. They need to upgrade at the O-line. Their two best O-linemen are leaving. And now this is going to be a ground up job on the defense. So obviously Riley's going to do his thing and get a bunch of guys in the portal. USC such a brand name. They've already gotten the kid out of Florida to play guard next year. So they're going to retool, but there's a lot going out the door here too, Ryan. So, there needs to be overcoming the guys that you're losing, and then you have to add so much more. So there's a lot of work still to be done for USC to be at that CFP level where we all expect them to be here going into next year and moving forward. You pay $100 million a year for a coach to really be a perennial CFP team. Obviously, year one has been still, to me, a huge success, going from 4-8 to 11-3 with the Heisman Trophy winner. But now moving forward, Ryan, year two is the new year three in college football for coaches when it comes to the situation that's going on with the transfer portal and being able to play right away and all of the inherent advantages that LA has with nil. So now, look, the honeymoon period for Lincoln Riley now is officially over. Now marriage has begun. And now this is CFP or bust next year, and there's a lot of work to be done.
So, very simple, pointing question: do you think he has it in him to move on from Grinch? Or, I mean, that was his guy at Oklahoma. Oklahoma never had great defenses. And if he does he make a splash? Do you get a guy like a Gary Patterson or a Jimmy Lake, or is it someone on staff already, or is it maybe an up and coming position guy out there? I mean, obviously we have a lot of offseason to talk about, but if they're going to make this move, it's going to have to be fairly quickly. You remember last year when UCLA obviously technically wasn't fired, it was Azanero resigned. I don't know how much force that was from Chip Kelly, but it happened, and if I remember correctly, early January, because you got to start making these moves, and especially with recruiting. So is this something where, A, do you think he has the fortitude to do it, and B, if he does, who can you see potentially going after?
Ryan, I think if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in the next 24 hours, because that's how quickly these things need to happen. To sort of set yourself up in terms of recruiting and staff and what have you. So he's going to have a plane ride to think about this one way or the other. Everything that you and I have heard, and you and I are pretty close to the program, Ryan, we have a lot of sources across the program, is he's such a loyal guy. He's got those Southern, values of loyalty and just being a good person, that I don't think he's going to do it. I think this is going to ultimately have to be forced with a Mike Bone. And I think that they're still in the honeymoon period of year one, where I think he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. I have a feeling Riley's going to rationalize it, that it was on him, that he made some poor choices in terms of play calling down at the 1 yard line to even give Tulane the ball back with a chance to do it. And so I think the combination of his character and I think his self-rationalization, I think Grinch will survive. I don't think he should survive, but I'm just sort of tapping into what I think who Riley is as a human being. Lincoln Riley, I have so much respect for him as an individual. So I think Grinch is going to get one more year, but I think that's it. I think it's going to be do or die for Grinch going into 23. And I think who you would kind of go after, I've always talked about what I think about Gary Patterson and his ability to be able to control defenses. And I think what Gary Patterson helped pave the road to make TCU what they are now in so many ways as a household name. And I think the connection between Gary Patterson and Lincoln Riley from their Big 12 days, I think there's an inherent chemistry there. And Gary Patterson having to go up against the air raid offenses and the variants of the air raid when Mike Leach was at Texas Tech, I think it just makes a lot of sense in the world to look at a Gary Patterson, but I don't think he's going to do it. Having said that, if it does happen, this isn't going to be one of those things that's going to be dragged on for days and weeks. He's either going to get fired in the next 24 hours or he's going to be safe.
Yeah. I know. I mean, going into this game, if you would ask me, I think regardless of what happened, I would say, yeah, Grinch is safe. They're going to run it back. It's 1 year in the system. You're still trying to get some different players in. They've now in the transfer portal got some backers already that kind of fit this Grinch system better. But just the way that this game was lost, and yeah, I agree with everything you're saying about, Lincoln Riley putting on him as he always does as a leader, the loyalty there. But I would lean now towards more the other way. Just, you're up 15 points and I know you give up the safety and and everyone talks about, I keep hearing, hire a special teams coach. Like, it's not on a special. I mean, Mario Williams called a fair catch. He did the right thing. You just got to catch the ball. Like, just catch the football. That's not on a special teams coach if your sure-handed guy can't catch it. So it was on the defense when you gave up 2 plays, touchdown in whatever it was, 30 seconds. And then they let him drive down 2 4th down conversions. One of them a 4th and 13 or 4th and maybe it was 4th and 10, but 4th and double digits. The other one 4th and 6 for the scramble.
Yeah. I tweeted, Ryan, it was 17 years in one day. It's almost 17 years to the day that another 4th and 6 does USC in on a major bowl game after being up double digits in the fourth quarter. And you just knew. Even at 4th and 6, I had no confidence the defense could stop it. Even at 4th and 11, I had no confidence the defense could stop it. You just knew they were going to go down and score. And frankly, everything sort of worked out for them. The tight end actually dropped the ball on the previous play to the touchdown, and that could have potentially run out the clock. And the way they scored with 9 seconds left, 9 seconds is that was probably think about this too, Ryan. They had to have scored and also scored in under 10 seconds, because anything more than 10 seconds and Caleb still has time to run 2 plays to get into field goal range. So think about that for a second. Not only did Tulane have to score, they basically had to chew enough clock and score at the end. And so getting to 4th down for them was actually more beneficial, because it was taking up more plays and more clock and leaving SC with less time. And, that's how great Caleb Williams is. Even with 9 seconds left, even the announcers were like, well, there's a chance here. And you knew the game was kind of over when they squibbed the kick and Austin Jones got it at the 10 with only 7 seconds. That's when you knew it was probably ball game. But if that one just sails out of bounds and Caleb still has 2 plays in 9 seconds, you still think maybe there's a chance there because he's that special. But, it's just unreal how the defense basically just folded. And Ryan, again, I go back to it. He had 3 completions on the last drive. He had 5 completions going into that last drive. The whole game plan was just give the ball to Tyjae Spears and Pratt scrambling. If his first read and second read wasn't there, he was just going to take off. That was the game plan. And that was still good enough. Forget about the last drive. 5 completions and that rudimentary of a game plan with an elite running back, mind you, was still good enough to have the ball with 2.5 minutes to play, down 1 score and a chance to win. So regardless of even if that final drive does or does not happen, that rudimentary game plan was still good enough to give yourself a chance to win a football game in the fourth quarter against the Heisman Trophy winner. That's how much of a gap there is right now between the USC offense and the USC defense. And this is now 2 of the 3 losses, Ryan, were by a single point this year.
Yep. And you alluded to it. If the offensive game plan is that simple and you can still impose your will, it means either 2 things. The talent discrepancy is so huge. So either Tulane's offense is so much more talented than USC's defense, which I don't think.
Tulane's offense is less talented than USC's defense.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I don't think anyone would agree with that. So that's one. It's either that or it's that the scheme, the coaching, the whatever is so poor, or the in-game adjustments are so poor that you still can't stop it. And that seems to be the case here. And obviously that was the case here and what happened in giving up 46 points. Chance here has asked us, you alluded to it, Jamal, but we'll just give him an answer. Do you think Mike Bohn steps in? I think the way they hired Riley, they basically said, you have full control of the program, like hands off. This is your ship. We believe in you. We see what you've built. But do you think Mike could still go in there and say, hey, guy, come on, this is year 1. Yes, there's high expectations. Yes, all this. But at the same time, we just lost to Tulane in the Cotton Bowl after giving up 46 points. Like, something's got to give here.
Chance, it's a great question. To me, I think he should. I don't think he will. Because I think that the power dynamic changes. You see, that's the other element that people don't realize. When you give $100 million to a coach, you have changed the power dynamic. Lincoln Riley controls this program and really controls the athletic department because USC doesn't give a rip about any other sport other than football. And so Lincoln Riley is the real athletic director of USC. And so Mike Bohn did what he needed to do to get a guy like Lincoln Riley. Rick Caruso was involved. The trustees were involved. The board was involved. And so now that you give this guy all of this money and give him all of this praise, and we got our guy, and now we're going to be the mecca of college football again, very hard to go in there and say, Lincoln, I want you to now remove your friend. And I think that's a very difficult thing. I don't think Mike Bohn has it in him right now to do that. And B, I don't think he has it in him to do that after year 1. He should. That's the right thing to do as the athletic director. But I think there's too much of a discrepancy in the power dynamic. Now, I think if this was the end of year 2 of Lincoln Riley and Bohn had a little bit more quote unquote support from not just the fan base, but some of the power boosters. Because Riley has been there 2 years, the honeymoon period has worn off, and now it's all about sort of getting into that window of opportunity. Then I think it's a different story. But I think he should do it. I have a hard time seeing that he will right after year one.
Yeah, I see this question here. Most likely, Utah's defensive coordinator is going to become the next head coach of Utah if Whittingham retires. He's kind of the placeholder there to take over. But here's another question, Jamal. We can wrap up here soon, but this is all good stuff. And this is kind of an unfair question, but it just came to me while you were talking because I mean we have never seen this in college football, so there's no real answer. But just curious your thoughts. In a college football world now, where NIL is supreme, and we've mentioned it, USC has all the NIL out there that they could be a top 5 in terms of just money coming in for the NIL stuff. Is there a world where boosters go to Lincoln and say, hey, we're not paying players unless you remove your defensive coordinator? Why am I going to give NIL money for these defensive guys if I just know they're not going to perform at the high level? Is there a world you could see where maybe that happens?
Absolutely. I do. I think that, and again, it speaks, Ryan, to that power dynamic. I don't think the traditional administrators at the university have the power in this particular dynamic right now after you pay a guy $100 million, but the folks who do are the big money boosters, and the very, very prominent alumni. And when I say prominent alumni and big money boosters, I'm talking about individuals that you can count on one hand or two hands. Those billionaire boosters, where every school has them, and we sort of know who they are for USC as well. They could go to Lincoln as an alliance and say, look, I know this was a great first year, but there's a clear deficiency here for us to be able to move forward. So I think there's a world where that happens, but you got to also understand, Ryan, that in terms of, I think a lot of the nil stuff is getting overblown a little bit in terms of how much each player is getting. I think each player potentially is getting 50,000, 70, 80,000. But when you talk about the big money, 7-figure nil, the Bryce Young money, the Caleb Williams money, the Marvin Harrison Jr. money, and beyond, you're talking about one or two guys on a team that are getting that degree of money to be able to move the envelope. And when you look at USC, the two guys that have significant nil are Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison. And when you look at their endorsements, Caleb's big money is coming from Beats by Dre and these massive brands and these huge Fortune 20 companies and these worldwide brands. And you look at a guy like Jordan Addison, it's coming from United Airlines. So a lot of this is also out of the big money boosters are providing the collectives and the pool of money to be able to go after a bunch of players. But outside of the one or two guys that are making 7 figures, everybody else is in that 50 to 100K range. And so I don't know if that amount of money is enough, again, to move the needle in terms of policy shifts and making decisions. I'll tell you what will move the needle now that we're talking is if Caleb Williams comes to Lincoln and says, listen, I might sit out next year. I got nothing to prove. There's enough on tape. I might sit out next year. I may only play half the season next year unless we get a credible defensive coordinator. Because for me, what do I have to lose? I've already won the Heisman. I'm already established as the top prospect in 23. I've already played in a Cotton Bowl. I mean, the thing that I'm coming back for is to be in the college football playoff and win a national championship. And I don't believe we have the defense to really give us a credible opportunity. So if you look at it from a Caleb perspective and Caleb family's perspective, now I think he's too much of a competitor for this to happen. But I'm just saying hypothetically, if he comes and says, look, we just don't have the roster to compete for a national championship, and there's nothing else besides the national championship that I need to be playing for. Everything else is downside risk for me in terms of getting hurt. So unless we get a big time guy like a Gary Patterson, like the defensive coordinator from Utah, like some of these hot names in the SEC, in the ilk of a Dan Lanning to come and be the defensive coordinator of USC for 23, I'm only going to play half the season. I'm going to pick the games I want to play, and I'm going to sit out a la the NBA regular season. That would force Lincoln Riley's hand in a way that's, I think, much greater than anything Mike Bone could say or anything that even the boosters could say.
Yeah, and let's be real, and you said it, Caleb Williams is not going to do that. However, but I could see Caleb making a case like, hey, like this is you see what I did all year. Like, come on, like give me 4 or 5, give me 7 stops so I can sit out for part of the fourth quarter and get some rest here, which I know he doesn't want to do anyway, never wants to come out of games, but I could see him at least having a conversation with Coach Riley. Like, look, I came here to play with you and play with national championships, but I also need some defensive help here. So that's a great point. I think he would probably carry the most weight out of everyone, not because I don't think he would ever sit out games, or he would not be that prima donna where he's like, because I mean, that, let's be real, I don't think that would really hurt his stock, but NFL teams would take notice, like, oh, here's a guy that quit on his team and yada, yada, yada. So he's not going to do that. But if him having a real poignant conversation and saying, like, we need to make changes here, I think it would go a long way. So, all right, any last minute questions, guys, get them in. If not, we will end with this one. Another one from Chance. Thanks for the question. Do you think this will cost us transfers and recruits moving on? Now, I'll let you answer this too, but I would say, just my opinion, you could disagree, a game like this does so much more for a program like Tulane than it does hurt USC, in my opinion. I think this thing does a lot for Tulane in getting more recruits, saying, look what we just did, New Year's Six game. We've rebuilt this program, had one of the biggest turnarounds in college football history, beat a powerhouse like USC. I think that helps Tulane out. I don't think it does enough to hurt USC because I think they've shown enough all year. They show what USC guys want to come play with Caleb. Guys want to say, okay, I was that piece that got them to the next step from Cotton Bowl loss to college football playoff. That's my opinion. I don't know if you agree or not.
No, Ryan, I completely agree. And I think it's a great question by Chance. And I think, Chance, we're now in a world where we actually have to separate the terminology of recruits. Because if you're talking about the high school recruits and the guys that are coming straight from high school, yeah, they're going to question a little bit, especially on that defensive side. Like, Grinch doesn't know what he's doing. They don't really have a scheme. Is this the best way for me to get to the NFL in terms of my development from day one to year 2 or 3? Now, the reality is Alex Grinch is probably not going to be the defensive coordinator by the time these recruits finish their college careers. But from a high school perspective, it makes you pause a little bit. From a transfer portal perspective, I would argue it actually helps USC, because I think there could be a lot of defensive players all over the country where they could be disgruntled with their situation. Either they don't feel like they're getting enough shine, enough opportunity. There may be backups in situations they don't believe that they're backups. And if they see an ability to connect the dots here and say, you know what, I could go play for a blue blood in USC, play with the Heisman winner, and really come in right away and make an impact and make a name for myself, because this team is really clueless defensively and really doesn't have a lot of very good players on that side of the ball. I could see this really help USC from a transfer portal perspective over the next 6 to 8 to 10 weeks in terms of getting in by the time spring ball begins. So again, I think high school recruits think a little bit differently because they're younger. I think transfer portal kids are looking, where can I go make that immediate splash right now? Because I'm already using up some years of my eligibility. My window is narrowing. Where can I go to really, I'm less concerned about development. I'm more concerned about instant gratification, instant shine, because I'm running out of runway. So the high school kids are thinking more about the runway. They're going to think about bigger picture things about scheme and coaching staff and stability to a certain extent. I think the transfer portal kids are looking for an immediate splash. And in that way, I think it really helps USC. And I think, Ryan, just to double click on some of the things we talked about with Caleb earlier, look, I think Caleb wants to come back this junior year and really win. As great as Caleb is, and you and I have spoken superlatives about him throughout the season, and rightfully so. He's the Heisman Trophy winner. He's the best player in America. I told him he was the best player in America after the Pac-12 championship. But now he goes into year 3 of his college career, Ryan. He has still yet to win the conference in any one of his 2 years. He has still yet to win any major bowl game. He has still yet to play for a team with less than 3 losses. And so, he needs to sort of come back, and he doesn't need to prove anything necessarily. But I know that he wants to put a real winning team together here. Because the one thing, Ryan, I will say that'll make NFL GMs and decision makers question is, with all of that offensive talent and the best coach and the best situation, and you're so great, why couldn't you win more? You know, the Mahomeses of the world, the Rodgers of the world, the Josh Allens of the world. We've talked about this a bunch, that the best NFL quarterbacks are the guys that take these 4-win programs and elevate them, turn them into 8 and 9-win programs. Historically, it's the guys from the blue chip programs outside of Joe Burrow who took what he had and blew every record out of the book, kind of struggle at the next level because they don't have the advantages on offense that they did in college, and that discrepancy really reveals itself. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen to Caleb, but that would be the one chink in the armor there that I would question if I was an NFL GM is why couldn't you win more with all of these advantages that were built in? And obviously, for those of us who are looking with a fine-tooth comb, it is the defense. But I think Caleb really wants to have a bulletproof 100 out of 100 resume in terms of being the de facto number 1 pick. And so I think this is a big year for him coming up because SC's got to make that jump. It's year 2 of Lincoln, year 3 of Caleb in college football. This is a CFP or bust type of situation moving forward, and they really got to get to work because there is a gap. If you watched the playoff games and you watch this game, there is a gap between the playoff teams. I know those were high-scoring games. I know those defenses gave up points, but USC would have really struggled, especially against Georgia and Michigan, in terms of where they were kind of in the trenches, in particular in those teams. So there is a step that needs to be taken. Let's see if they can get all the way in 1 year going into 23.
Yeah, I think though, and I think at this point, I agree with you, but I think at this point, and you mentioned it, but it's clear that the issue is the defense. If you average 40 points a game, hard to put that on him, considering that's what Mahomes dealt with, and Mahomes went top 10. So
I'm just saying, I'm not putting anything on him. I'm just saying that there is a little bit of a hole in the resume right now to win, and
yes.
you know, USC is not Tulane, and USC, no disrespect, is not TCU, and USC is not Penn State, and USC is not Utah. I know that Utah beat us twice, so you know, as an SC fan, we have to sort of take that. But those are different programs historically and in terms of their trajectory. So this is all to say, Caleb Williams is the best player in America. He's going to be the best player in America again in 23. But I think now the honeymoon period for Lincoln Riley is officially over after this game, and it's going to be CFP or bust next year. And there's no other way to sugarcoat it. There's no other way to put optimism around it. It is CFP or bust in 2023. And that's where USC should be having their expectations every year.
Yep. I think it's going to be CFP or bust every single year moving forward, especially with Caleb next year. And then you get Malachi Nelson right after that, one of the top QBs in the nation recruited. So anyway, tough loss, 46-45, ends the year, or begins the year, I should say, on a sour note. Real excited now, Jamal, for the spring game, so we can kind of get this taste out of our mouth, look towards the future. But obviously, if there is a change at defensive coordinator in the next 24, 48 hours, we will be back on with an emergency podcast. I'm sure we will be back regardless later in the week with some more talk about how this year ended, maybe after some time to settle and kind of get into it. But for Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dyward. Thank you all for tuning in. Tough loss, but hey, 11-3 season. We'll try to take some of the goods out of it and hopefully use this to build. And next year at this time, hopefully we're sitting back preparing for a national championship game after winning on New Year's Eve. So we'll see what happens. But thank you all so much for tuning in. This is the LA Football Show. Talk to you guys all here in a bit.